A twofold program tonight. First of all, we'll also talk about time travel and contemporary voodoo priests. Priestesses, magicians, and enchanters use rare herbs and spices, as well as charms, dolls, to control the natural world in ways that science simply cannot always explain. But who may explain it? Lionel Fanthorpe, and he's next on Coast to Coast AM. Well, here he is, Lionel Fanthorpe, born in England, and he's worked as a journalist, a teacher, currently director of media studies at Cardiff Academy. He is a fully ordained Anglican priest, working part-time and unpaid for the church in Wales. Lionel is also president of the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, also the president of BUFORA, which happens to be the British UFO Research Association. I'm just going to sit back for 3 hours now, prop my feet up on the desk, and let Lionel Fanthorpe just talk. Lionel, how you doing?
Absolutely fine, George. Lovely to hear from you. And I can never live up to that wonderful introduction, but I can try.
Oh, yes, you can. First of all, how are you feeling?
Well, delighted to say I'm just 100% well again. I had these problems, as you know, and you were kind enough to tell our listeners, and I had so many messages of goodwill. They're still piling up on my email. It's lovely. There's some very nice people out there who wished me recovery, and their wishes have been granted. I feel a new man.
And I was looking at the calendar this year. Christmas falls during the week, which means I'll be doing a live program Christmas night and Christmas Eve, which means I'm pulling out the night before Christmas that you were so gracious to do for us last year.
Oh, that'll be a real honor and privilege for me. It's a wonderful poem, and I couldn't ask for a better Christmas present than to know that you're doing it on your great show.
Twofold night tonight, time travel, and also the incredible story of mysteries and secrets of voodoo. Santeria and, how do you pronounce that last one? Obia?
Obia. That's what I would call it, yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Well, it's one of the many mystery religions of which Voodoo and Santeria are probably the best known, but they tend to have slightly different names and titles. They're spread over the Caribbean, over the southern states of the USA, in Central America, and in some of the South American countries, and Haiti and Cuba, and it all goes back to the days of that triangular trade when slaves were brought over from Africa, and the ships then went on with raw materials like cotton and sugar and took them to Britain and Europe, and then they sailed on from there, having sold the products, and bought more slaves, and so there was this triangular run. Now, the people who were brought across as slaves had their own very, very ancient, time-honored religions, but the slave owners were frightened that people who had a strong faith, something that would unite them, they were afraid that that would make them strong and able to rebel. So they tried to forbid the old African religions with their orishas, who were powerful spirits, demigods, and the loas, who were another name for these powerful spirits.
We'll get into all of these in just a moment, Lionel, but I wanted to talk with you for some time this hour about time and time travel, which has always been of particular interest to you, hasn't it?
Oh, it has, yeah. And you and I, with our interest in strange mysteries, tend to think that coincidences are rather more than coincidences. We maybe go along with Jung, the great psychologist, and say that they are synchronicities. And I had one very recently. A couple of weeks ago, I was working as one of the lecturers on the Discworld Convention. Here, I think he's pretty well known in the USA too, but we've got a great friend of mine, Terry Pratchett, who writes these Discworld novels.
Right, okay.
And it's a kind of science fiction fantasy in which there's the Discworld is the setting for them all. Anyway, in the lectures that I was asked to give, that convention was dealing with time. And in one of Terry's books, there are things called procrastinators, and they are revolving cylinders, and you can carry them around on your back, and it will give you power over time. And the odd thing is that they link in with an invention by a real scientist, not a fictional scientist, by the name of Tipler. And he says that if you had a cylinder that was big enough and rotating fast enough, pretty well close to the speed of light, that would affect the time around it. But you've got to have a mass of several neutron stars to make the real one work. The one that Terry wrote about can go on your knapsack on your back. But it just seems so interesting that there in his imaginary world, the procrastinators operated just like Tipler cylinders, but in miniature. And I was talking, I said, on them just a couple of weeks back, and here we are talking about time on your great show.
You know, very shortly, within a few hours, they're going to turn on the Large Hadron Collider in CERN in Switzerland. They're not going to do the ultimate test yet, and that's the particle collisions, but they're going to turn it on nonetheless. You know, there are some scientists out there, Lionel, who think that it could create a disaster on this planet, could create a black hole that would literally eat the planet from within. I'm also thinking, what are the possibilities? Because you just mentioned, speed of light and traveling.
Yeah.
What if this collider somehow creates some kind of a Stargate, a portal, or something like that? I mean, is that even conceivable?
Yes, I think it is. And just as it is remotely possible that it would trigger a black hole. But I think the overwhelming view of the scientists who are conducting the experiments, who've created the equipment, feel that there is no real threat from that. It's just like if we went back 50 years and more to when nuclear science was just coming. I can remember reading in all the tabloid papers, everybody was terrified that if they tried to split the atom, as they then called it, that it would create a chain reaction, and once they split one atom, that would go on right through the atmosphere. Then it would pick up the water in the oceans, and the whole Earth would disappear in this massive chain reaction. Well, as we know, we've had nuclear power and nuclear power stations for a long time now, and we're still here. But there is, theoretically, this remote risk that you mentioned, George, that it could possibly trigger a black hole. The other thing which I find, and I'm sure you will, and our listeners will too, more exciting and unthreatening, is that it could create what the astrophysicists refer to as wormholes.
Yes.
There's our way through time and space to another probability track, another universe, part of the multiverse system, so that this could be year zero for time travel machines, because you could only go back, and Tipler, with his cylinder that I was talking about earlier, was of the opinion that once you'd got the thing started and had influenced time, you could only go back to the moment when it started. So let's just suppose that they do manage to open a few wormholes that we could use for time travel. Well, then what's going to happen is that 2008 will become year zero, so that some guy living 100 years ahead of us could come back and look at you and could listen to us doing our broadcast tonight, but he couldn't get any further. He couldn't go back and visit our grandparents.
I have got to get you in touch with physicist Ronald Mallet.
Right.
He wants to go back into time. He's working on a time machine now. Right. He's got an incredible theory how he's going to do it, but he wants to go back to see his father. I guess his father died when he was 10, and he was really never able to kick up that father-son relationship. It has obsessed him. It has pushed him into being a physicist. It has pushed him into trying to find the way to time travel. You've got to meet him, because that would be an incredible moment.
Yeah, and he's based in the States.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, next time we come over, I'll phone you or Tom,
and we'll find him.
And you find it. I would love to have dinner with him. That would be terrific.
They're working on a movie on his life. Spike Lee is, and it's going to be a drama based on him as a professor.
Right.
And, of course, he won't tell me the ending yet or who's going to play his part.